Alright everybody, we're going to get started now. First of all, I'd like to announce that this is the first ever video recorded ACM meeting. So if everyone wants to turn around and wave to the camera, you're going to be on the internet. So let me know if your face blurred, I guess.
So you didn't turn around.
And yeah, but today
I didn't
Kelly is
turn
going
around.
to be doing an intro to iOS development tutorial. Kelly is the TA of the 475, application programming class with Hannon. And she was an industry iOS developer this summer, so she's very experienced. So with that being said, Kelly, take it away.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kelly. As Austin said, I have a little bit over a year now experience in iOS development. This summer I was working at Intuit, working in Objective-C, and this fall, I taught myself Swift this summer, and I'm helping teach the class this fall in Swift. So today, I'm just going to go into the basics of iOS development and Xcode with you guys, and then we'll do a little demo at the end written in Swift. And feel free to interrupt me at any point if you have questions, and I'll try my best to answer them. So let's get started. So just to start, if you're not familiar with what iOS is, it's the mobile operating system for iPhones and iPads as developed by Apple. And it is developed for iOS in their IDE, which is called Xcode. And Xcode supports the two primary languages that I mentioned, Objective-C and Swift. Swift is rather new, as you can see. It was announced at WWDC in 2014. Swift 2.0 just came out in May or June WWDC. And since it's so new, lots of companies are trying to start switching over to Swift, but they don't want to make their production environment unstable, so usually you see Swift in like side projects, but not like actual apps quite yet. So just to tell you a little bit about Objective-C, it was released in the early 1980s as a superset of C. It's been used since then. It's still used heavily today in probably all the apps on your phone. Since it's been around a while, there's a lot of different classes and things in the code base. It's a mature code base, and it's object-oriented. It completely works with C, and it adds message passing styles. But more interesting, in my opinion, is Swift. And this was just released, as I mentioned. It's also object-oriented. It's very class-based. One of the more exciting features is that it's a strongly typed language, but it includes typed inference. So what that means, if you're not familiar with that, is you could just assign a variable to any object, and you don't have to explicitly tell it what type you are. So if you said like var my name equals, and then gave it a string and said Kelly, it would infer that that is indeed a string. You don't have to explicitly say var of type string. So that's kind of interesting. You can do a lot with that. There's also a lot of functionality with all the things you see there: classes, methods, variables, protocols, enums, and collections. Protocols and enums are kind of really exciting for Swift. I won't go into too much detail because I think that's a little too in-depth for this talk, but if you want to learn more, I can tell you after. So Xcode, as I mentioned, is the IDE. It runs on Macs, and it's used for iOS apps. It supports both Objective-C and Swift, and you can do lots of things with Xcode. So we'll go into it, and I'll show you Xcode later. So this is kind of the overview before I actually show you it running live, but it has a bunch of different areas that you can see. It's not too exciting, I won't go into this too in depth. But, so next we can just talk about designing an iOS app. So this takes a lot of skill to architect the perfect app. You see so many apps out there that probably all the ones running on your phone, they're all really clean and have a nice UI. That's because Apple is really focused on only accepting apps into the App Store that conform to their standards. So if you were to submit something that, I don't know, didn't look very good, or it didn't follow some of their rules for development, you would not be accepted into the App Store. It's a very rigorous process, and I know lots of people who just keep getting rejected, and they just have to keep trying again. So when you're designing your app, it's really important to follow Apple's standards, and Xcode can help you with this, with the different tools such as auto layout and the different ways you can make your user interfaces. So what auto layout is, I'm going to talk a lot in depth about that, but it's basically a way to create your apps for different size devices. So it allows you to just design one UI, and it will, if you rotate your phone, it will look as you expect it to look, both in landscape and portrait mode. So there's also something called the simulator, which is a virtual device. So it can be, you can change it to be any size device that Apple releases. So it can be an iPad, it can be like iPad Air, it can be an iPhone 4S, and it allows you to test your apps in the IDE. So you don't have to have every single size device to test your app. So within Xcode, there's something called Interface Builder, and this is where you design the UI. They're called storyboards. What you see, the first name, last name, that's just a basic storyboard with 2 text fields and 2 labels. And this is, it's very much like drag and drop. There are some other aspects of the storyboard and the interface builder, but you'll have a collection of different elements. So you can have like a table view or a label or a text box, and you click and drag from your library and drag it onto the storyboard. So as I mentioned, auto layout, that's something it's been around for a while, but Apple actually just released a major update to it just a few years ago. And a lot of developers are having trouble kind of learning how to use it properly, but it's really important. So I want to stress this because if some of you are aware, iOS 9 that just came out, for the iPads, they support multitasking. So did you guys hear about that? Who doesn't know about that? Okay, well, I'll explain it. So on some of the new iPads, Apple just announced for iOS 9, you can run 2 apps at the same time and split the screen. So 2/3 of the screen will be one app, and then the other half, the other third of the screen will be the other app, and they're running side by side, and you see both apps at the same time. So in order to achieve this, when you're designing your apps, you have to use auto layout so that it can conform to that specific size and not squish your text and make it look as if you didn't want it to look. So that's what auto layout's all about. You basically have to tell each element on your storyboard how it should present itself. So you can use dynamic constraints. I'll show you more in detail on this because I know it's probably a lot just to understand from me speaking about it. But 2 examples that I listed is you could set a fixed space between 2 labels if you wanted them to always be 5 pixels apart, no matter your device size. You can also make that something really dynamic. You could say, I want the space between 2 elements to be half the space of the screen on. So like on an iPhone, it would be shorter, but then on the iPad, they would be much further apart. So it's all about adaptive layout. So these are some of the different size devices that Apple has released. I know there's a lot more variation, but auto layout deals with these different sizes, and these are some of the names for how you would design your app for that. So I mentioned the simulator already. As you see, it looks just like the screen on your iPhone or your iPad, and this will run right on your computer screen in Xcode, and it will run your app. You can also exit out of your app, and it will function like a normal iPhone or an iPad. Can't make calls, but you can go into all the other Apple apps and settings and change things and test your app exactly like you would with a real phone. So now we'll get into the fun part. We're going to do a demo, and I'll show you guys how to make a really simple app. So if you have a Mac with Xcode, feel free to follow along. This is definitely something that if you've never used Xcode before, you can definitely follow along. So to start, we're going to go to, if you open it up, you'll probably get a modal prompt, but we're just going to do a new project. And you're going to see this menu here. And basically what this is, it tells you the different starter templates you can have for your application. So the most simple template that we're going to use today is single view application, but if you look through this, you can see there's lots of different things you can do in Xcode, more than just iOS. You can also develop for the Apple Watch. With watchOS 2 that just came out, you can develop for OS X, which is the desktop and the laptop operating system. So as I mentioned, we'll do single view application today. So you can give your app a name. We're going to call this we are Penn State. And you can fill in your name if you want. In the language, we're going to use Swift today, and then here is where you can choose if you want to design an app just for the iPhone, just for the iPad, or universal, meaning all device sizes. We're going to do universal. You can leave these 3 things unchecked. We're not going to do unit tests today. Then just choose a place to save this. So what you have here is the start of your project. You have the settings of your project, which can be found when you click on the name of your project up here. You also have your main view controller. This is where the chunk of your code, the main chunk of your code is going to go. But to start, I'm going to show you the storyboard. And I'm going to stop here for questions really quick because I know that was a ton of content and I'm sure it doesn't make sense. So does anyone have questions? Yeah?
So just like definitively, which one would you recommend between Swift and Objective-C if we've never used either before? Do you think we should just like get with the times and use Swift? Or?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say one is easier than the other, but if you want to try something new, Swift is, you can definitely pick it up. I think Objective-C is a little more convoluted, so maybe in that sense it's a little bit more difficult, but the functionality is mostly the same. Swift has some new fancy features, but if you're doing something really basic and you're not using those fancy features, then it's really up to you.
Okay.
You said auto layout handles a lot of like all of the screen changes. Like how does it, or does it also handle like multiple or different pixel densities? Because I know like the Retina displays would need like bigger pictures than a regular display would. Like
right.
does it handle all of that in like I don't know, pixels or
yeah.
like
yeah.
Okay.
So you don't have to deal with that, but it's kind of already dealt with when you put your constraints on and the device that has the higher resolution pixels is running it.
So it deals with that all behind the scenes. You don't have to, okay.
Any other questions?
Can anything in Swift then be like converted to Objective-C?
Yeah, so something neat that Apple did was with the release of Swift, you can make apps that have both languages running side by side. I haven't done that yet, but I know this summer at my internship we were writing all of our code in Objective-C, but our unit tests were in Swift, and that was totally fine. You can even do it like in the same file. You could have Swift and Objective-C. That was your question, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Any more before I start the demo? Cool. So what you're seeing here is our interface builder, also known as storyboard. They used to be 2 separate, like this interface builder used to be a separate tool from Xcode, which is why some people still refer to this screen as the interface builder, but a lot of people who are newer to iOS development and never experienced it as a separate app like to just call this the storyboard. So what we have here is our view controller. When you start a single view application, this view controller here is connected up to the code in this view controller. If you were to make a new view controller so that you would have multiple screens for your app, something like this, you would also need to make a new file to go with it. But we're just going to stick to the one view today. So what we're going to do first is we're going to add some elements here. What our app is going to do, you guys want to see the finished app so you understand what we're doing before we do it? Or yes? Okay. I thought that might be helpful. So so here's the finished app.
It's just because it's such a high resolution, it's gonna, I don't know, maybe
And this here, what you see is the simulator that I mentioned. Currently, it's sized to be an iPad Air 2, but you can go up to the simulator and you can actually change this to be any device size. Yeah, so this is a button, and we're basically going to make like a Hello World app, but for Penn State. And it's just going to, we can add more features than this. This is super basic, but yeah, that's what we're going to add. Thank you today. That was something I wanted to add. So, to start, we have our blank view controller, and we're going to add our labels. down in the right-hand corner, you can see what I mentioned as like your library of UI tools. So if you just want to filter for a label, you can drag and drop, and you have a label. And what we can do now is in this right side, this is our, I think it's called the details pane? I might have that wrong. But you can do a lot of different things related to the details of the object you're currently working on. So for our label, we can change the title of this. So we can make it say VR, and we can change the font if we want, the size. We could even change the color if we really want. I'm going to also center this. So now we want another label that says Penn State. And something neat you can do is if you hold down the Option key and you click on an element and then click and drag, it will actually duplicate it and keep the same properties that you made for the first one. So I'm doing this because I don't want to recenter and resize the font to match for this. And we would just change this to say. So next we want to add our image of our Nittany lion. So you can search for something that's called an image view. And what an image view is basically just, it's a subclass of a view, which this entire thing is a view, and it allows you just to add an image. But it has the same functionality as a regular view, which is basically just a rectangle. So to load images into Xcode, you have to first download them. So I put them on my desktop. So I have two images here that we're going to use. You can click, drag, and drop into your project, and then make sure you have this top box checked. It's called copy items if needed, and what this does is it makes a copy of the image into Xcode so that it's not referencing the image locally on my desktop. So if you were to push this up to GitHub or something, if you hadn't checked this box, it wouldn't be able to run. It wouldn't be able to see the image because it doesn't have access to your desktop. So now we have our images here, and we can choose one to be the default image for our image view. So what you can do with these image views, there's a lot of different properties. We're going to stick to most of the default properties. The one that I am going to change is this mode here. Currently it's scale to fill. So whatever size we make this image view, the picture is going to just scale to fill the rectangle. But we don't really want that, so we're going to do the second option called aspect fit. So no matter what size we make this, the image is going to keep the same width and height dimensions as it originally had. So we'll stick with that. And then the last thing we need is our button. So if you search again for button, this will come up. And we can put it down here at the bottom. And this will have similar properties to the label in terms of what it says. So we're going to change this to say, the other one to say chant or cheer. Anyone have a preference? Alright, so we're going to, we can make this bold, make it really big so people know to press it. Alright, cool. So now we have this. We can also, if you click on the view, you can do things like change the background color if you really want. But then you have to be careful with your button color as well. Okay. So now we have our storyboard all set up. This is usually what you do first when you're making your app. Something that's really important is knowing how to design your storyboard before you start writing code. Because if you start writing code to adhere to a certain storyboard and then you decide you want to change the storyboard later, it's doable, but it's definitely better if you can, design it up front rather than going back and forth. But now what we're going to do is we're going to write some code. And the code needs to know, so first of all, what's going to be involved in our code is pressing this button, so we need to handle the button press. And then we're also going to want to show the "We Are," hide the Penn State, and when we press it again, we'll show the Penn State, hide the "We Are" label, and then after, what is it, 3? We show "Thank you," and then "You're welcome." And then we can also do some other things, but that's what we're going to do first. So in our code, we need to know how, like, when is the button pressed? How are we going to do that? So if you are following along, there's this assistant editor up top. It's kind of the 2 circles, like a Venn diagram. If you press that, what it's going to do is give you just a split screen, and you can look at 2 different sections of code or storyboard at once. So we're in our correct view controller. And what we can do now is we can kind of hook up our UI elements to our code. And this is called creating an outlet. So if you click on, this is our button. If you hold down the control key, click and drag, we can create, this is an outlet. So we're going to just call this chant button. And now we have an outlet to access this button. And then we're going to do the same thing for our labels. Label, and then same thing with Penn State. Penn State label. Does anyone have any questions so far? If you're following along, am I going too quick or too slow? Good? Yeah?
Is there any chance you might be able to bring the resolution down just a little bit, just so people could see it a little bit more, like the code itself? It's like just really small.
Or you can, yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better.
Is that big enough? I can go one size larger.
I think that's better. I don't know. Maybe I was speaking on behalf of other people, but yeah, I think that's probably a little bit easy. Maybe that's a little bit too big.
It's not really a happy medium. So.
I mean, the last one was pretty good. Thanks.
Okay, so we have our 3 outlets for our button and our 2 labels. We can also change the image, but we'll do that later. We'll just focus on the words right now. So what these outlets are basically just ways to change the visual aspect of what you've hooked it up to. So for our button, all that this outlet allows us to do is change what it says, change the color of the text, change the font size, the font type, things like that. But what it does not do is handle the press of a button. So what we do for that is also hold down the control key. We're going to create what's called an action. So that's just a different choice from the drop down there. And this is going to be, so we've selected the event touch up inside, which is basically just the first touch of a button. But you could change this to be fancy if you had some need for like touch ended or something. Editing did end. So we're just going to stick with touch up inside, and we'll say chant button pressed. And we're going to also change this type to be UI button. Yeah.
What does the inside versus outside represent?
Touch up.
Is there a touchdown?
There is touchdown. I'm not sure what all of these things do. You could definitely look them up. Yeah, to be totally honest, for buttons at least, I don't know really what the other ones are. Touch up inside is just the regular touch, but on things like a text field, editing did begin is when they click, when they're typing is while they're editing, and at the end, like editing did end type of thing. So I'm sure there's other states of a button, but I'm just not totally sure. But well, inside would be inside the balance of the button.
I think it's where you finish, because if it's touch up, it's when your hand, like your finger comes up. So if you accidentally click and you go somewhere else.
Touch up outside.
Is there a touch down outside?
Touch it? No, there's a touch finger off the button.
Right, so you touch down and you touch up outside, you know? So.
Wouldn't that be touch drag?
Well, no, because the whole point is you're trying to avoid when they accidentally touch it and then move off and release.
So where's a good place that people can look up things
But then
if
you'd
they
set
have
it to
questions
drag.
about Apple?
Good question. So you can definitely Google these things, and they will help you out. But if you wanted to know, Apple does have documentation, so you can look under help. Touchdown. I don't know if it's really going to show us. We can look at this at the end. If we have so anyway, now we have this nice function for when we press the button, and we can simply insert our code here for what we want to happen when we press the button. So now that we have our outlets, we can switch back to the regular editor full screen, and we can start writing our code. So when we press the button, what do we want to do? I'm going to ask you guys what to do.
Add one to a counter.
So you want to start a counter. Okay, so you can add, this will be a global variable, you think?
Yeah, I don't know actually.
Okay, so if you made it be local to this function, then you would press the button and you would have the count, and what, you set it to 1? Or what's your idea here?
Oh, you'd have to initialize it somewhere. Yeah,
You would want it to be global, because if you set it locally in this chant function, every time you pressed it would be reset.
So, but like, it's not in the class though? Like.
Yeah, so sorry, when I say global, I just meant like outside of the function.
Okay,
that was
yes.
that was bad definition. Sorry. Yeah, so we're going to define a variable for the count, as Drew has suggested. And in Swift, you can define variables with the keyword let, and you would say let and then the variable name, so we'll call this counter, and then you can explicitly type it and assign it to be an integer, or as I mentioned, since this is it supports type inference, especially capitalized, you don't have to do that. So we can just say equals 1 and it will infer that it is an integer. So now, Drew, what were you saying? What do we do with the counter?
Add 1 to it.
Add 1 to the counter. Okay,
Yes.
so you want to do counter plus plus. And you don't need semicolons in Swift. It's also an awesome feature. So, okay, so what this is saying is that you can't change an immutable variable. So since we use the let keyword, what that means is let is an immutable type. So you would use that for constants, but if you want to modify your variable, you have to change it to be var. So then this error will go away and it will let us do this. So now we also need to what? What do we need to do? We pressed it, the words were changing, right? So we already have 2 labels that say we are in Penn State. So if we only want to show we are and not Penn State, we can simply just hide one of the labels. So the labels have properties called hidden, and you can simply set them to be true or false. So we need some sort of check if we're on an even or an odd count, right? Because we are is shown on 1, 3, 5, right? Yeah. So we can check if counter mod 2 is 0, so this would be even. Else. Okay. So if we're even, we want to show Penn State, right? And hide we are?
No.
That's when it's
No. It's the other way around.
You start at 1 and then you immediately implement the counter. So your first check with counter was true.
So do you want to start the counter at 0? Or you're going to start at -1? Okay. So why do you want to do that? It's different. So the first time we press it, we're going to increment right away per Drew's suggestion, and it's going to be odd the first time. So we are going to want to show we are hide Penn State, and the opposite. So if we run this, let's see where we're at. Okay, so we are Penn State, and it keeps alternating. And they both showed up initially because we didn't initialize this. So, good question. So, why wasn't it centered? Would anyone like to take a stab at that? Emma.
Did you not do the auto layout?
Auto layout, that's great. So, I did not make it so that it conforms to any device size. So this is really important, as you can see, because on other devices that were smaller than that, it wouldn't even show up. So what you can do, we can do that kind of quickly. We'll do that because it's important. So what you do on your objects on the storyboard is you add constraints. So we can do that by using these buttons down here. I don't know if you can see those. Can you guys see the other boxes in the one? These 4 buttons? You see that? Okay. So what you can do is use those buttons to add what are called constraints to your objects, or you can use control drag again. I prefer the control drag method because it's a little bit easier. So what you can do is you can click from a label to the main view, and you can do things like vertical space to top. So what this does is it will pin this "we are" label to the top of any size device by that many pixels as we set. So right now we just set this to be 13 pixels from the top, whenever it runs. And then we can do the same with the button at the bottom. Vertical space to bottom. And we can set this to be, I don't know, we can make it like 50. That's fine. And then you would also need to space the rest of the objects. So you can space them between each other with vertical spacing. So now if you can kind of imagine this as a grid, every single object on here has a y coordinate because we pinned the "we are" to the top, the chant to the bottom, and then everything in between to each other. So they know how to lay themselves out in a vertical fashion. But things are still in red. Yeah?
Is this dynamic or not?
Yeah, so what's dynamic in what we've done here is the y coordinate of the top and the bottom. But if you wanted it to be a little bit more dynamic, when you place spacing between two things, you could do something like, you could make it it says multiplier, but you could make it like half the size or something and do proportions. But for this, we're just going to stick to absolute values. So now we need to also give everything a horizontal constraint. So to do that, you can simply control click again, and we're going to say center vertically in container. Okay, so now what's left to do is tell them how to size themselves. So you could say something like set the width, set the height, and then you could also do that for the rest of the objects. And it's still going to complain. So for this, we're going to make the image half the width of the screen that you're working on. So we have a lot of conflicts. It's really good with telling you what your conflicts are. I understand this is kind of difficult to understand, like what's happening if you haven't really used it. So we can skip ahead of this if you guys aren't super interested, but let me just get it working and then we can continue on. something we can do is we're gonna also center this image to be in the middle of the screen. And then what we can do is okay, so now it's showing us this is what it will look like at runtime when you update your frames, and obviously this isn't good. So we need to update the constraints a little bit more, so I'm going to go back and see what the issue is. It says that we're missing constraints on the chant button for this X position. So this means that we have not told it how to place itself. Maybe it's actually a line X. Yeah. Cool. Okay, cool. So now we're going to update the frame and see what it looks like at runtime. This is a little bit better. I think our height is a little just too big for this image. We're going to make it a little bit smaller. Height. We'll actually just make this 300. Okay, and then we'll update our frames again. And we're getting there. So our top space of the line, if you look here at this constraint, it's negative. So if we make this a positive number, then we'll space out a little bit better. And we also probably want to add some space between these things. So as you can see, sometimes auto layout gets like pretty tricky. So you just have to kind of mess around with it and really get it to work for your app as best as you can. So now if we run it, we should show up centered despite the device size. So cool, that worked. And our chant works. So next we're going to add in the count to add the thank you. So also we're going to initialize the app so that it shows up. How do you guys want it to show up? Do you want the we are to show first, or do you want it to say like start on the button? We can do kind of a bunch of different things here. Anybody? Opinions?
I'm going to show up. Bring the button, but like not the words.
So what do you want? Okay. So that means we have to hide those labels. And this function that I'm adding this to is called muted load. This gets called every time your page, the view controller that we're working on, is loaded. So that would be when it goes out of memory. So like if you go to a different page on the app, you don't need to allocate memory for that page anymore and it goes away. Then if you were to go back, it would reload and call everything in the muted load function. So now we have them hidden. We have our counter started at 0, and we have our chant button. So to start, we probably want the chant button to not say chant. We probably want it to say something like start. So we can change this with our outlet. Chant button dot title label is what it's called, and then dot text. We can call this start. And when we press this, we want to check in our function here. We can check if chant button dot title. Yeah, we can just use the same thing. Dot title label is equal to start. If this is true, then we want to set the we are label to be shown and the Penn State label to be hidden. So we are, and then we will increment the counter, so then the next time it's called, it will be even. So then I think that would be fine. We can just put this in an else statement so that we only do this once. And if you want to realign your code, you can press Control-I, and it will reindent everything really nicely. So now we have our start button. We've incremented our count so that the second time it will be 2 when we press it again, so we will get, I think this might be off. Wait, so the first time it's 0, we increment, we have true or false. So I think we actually need to not increment it the first time. Right? We'll figure it out. So, do you notice the text didn't change on our button like we thought it would? So, does anyone know why that was? Emma?
Oh, hold on. Why do you?
I think I called the wrong thing. Is it not title label, Emma?
Isn't it just text?
I don't think so.
Oh, I've done this before. Isn't it just label? I think it's just label.
This is of type label, and you're saying you want to say dot label. I don't think so. I think it might
that's not
actually
the
just be description. Well, anyway, we can figure that out. Sometimes returns a string and a description. Yeah, I think it is description. We'll see. It's not the most important thing. So then, when we're in here, we would also want to change the. Let's just go back. We would want to change it back if this was working. We would want it to say champion. Okay. And then now we want to. What's our issue now? Okay. I think that actually is it. So now we want to keep track of our counts if we're at. When do we show thank you? We are. We are Penn State. We are Penn State. 7, but it's 0 base is 6. Okay, so we want to check.
We do modules that first.
Yes. Hold on.
Yeah. When you greater than or equal to. Modulo would start repeating again.
Okay, so you would want to reset the count back to 0 when you get to 6, right?
Yes.
Okay, that would work. So we would want to just check if counter is equal to 6, then we would want to show we are label dot text equals thank you, and then we would want to we could increment the counter here. There are definitely better ways to do this. I'm kind of thinking of this on the spot. Yeah, I don't know.
So the reason why it didn't work is title label is a read-only property. So you do set attributed title. You do button dot set attribute.
Set.
Well, if you want to change it, it's set attributed title. So like at the top.
Yeah, yeah. So I can't just change the text, is what you're saying.
Well, not with just doing title label. You have to do.
Okay.
Because otherwise it's a read-only.
Okay, thank you. We can definitely change that. So if our counter is 6, we show thank you. If it's 7, we show you're welcome. I think there's probably a better way to do this with like the modulo, is what you're saying. Let's do this the naive way first. So we would want to show the we are label false. We would want to hide the Penn State label. And we would, if the counter was 7, we could make this say, you're welcome. False, and then we would reset our counter to 0. And we would want to make sure not to call these two functions, so we could check if counter is less than 6. let's try this out. So yeah, I'm always right, we still have to change this, but we are Penn State, we are Penn State. So now our count is 3, 4, 5, so 6 we want to show. Okay, so we're a little off here. So that's backwards. Let's figure out why. So something with our count. If our count is less than 6, then we increment. We show that, that's fine. Otherwise, it's greater than or equal to 6. If it's equal to 6, then we show, thank you. Okay,
It's running both 6 and 7 because it's on opposite.
thank you. Because we're incrementing in there 7. Okay, cool. And then our counter should reset so the next time we press, we should go in here again. I think it might not initialize right again, but let's try it. Let's set our title too. That attributed title. So this is a function where we can write our title.
It's just set title, actually, for a nicer one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Thank you. Or state, and so this is an enumerated type. These are the different states of a button. We're just going to say normal for our case, and we can copy this when we want to change it down. So change. Okay, cool. So this should work the first time through. We're definitely going to have an issue when we get to resetting. So I think it was, that's fun. Okay. So we're never changing the text back is the issue. We are resetting our counter, so that's fine, but we need to have maybe a reset function here. So we could define a function called reset. And we could just set our Penn State label to say Penn State again. We are labeling. And then we can also reset our counter in here since it's a reset function, and we would want to show Penn State and hide who we are, so. Or hide Penn State and show you. And we'll call this reset label. So then the next time we go through, our counter will be less than 6. We will increment the first time to 5, but we're already showing we are, so then we show Penn State. Okay, that should be fine. Let's try one more time. And then hopefully. So, okay, so we're starting with Penn State. That's an issue.
Start your counter at -1.
Actually, flip the we are in Penn State. Yeah, I think that would be. We are Penn State. We are Penn State. We are Penn State. Thank you. Alright, so we're having some issues here. There's definitely issues with the counter. I can show you how I did it the better way. And maybe we can.
Hey Kelly,
Yeah.
is there a built-in debugger for Xcode that?
Oh yeah, so that's something interesting. We can talk about how to debug your code. So if we go back here and we put a breakpoint in, then when we run this, when we press our 2 button the first time, we can see that our function was triggered. And if you look down here, it's a little hard to see, I know. You can see your variables. So self for all your local variables, and the sender is the variable local to the function. You can see that we can look at our counter, so it's 0 the first time we press, and then we can go through and figure out exactly why we're having issues here. So the second time we press it, it's still 0 because we didn't update it in here. So we're gonna look, our count is less than 6. We increment right away. So this is going to show, currently we have nothing shown, right? Oh, we have we are shown. So we're going to hide we are, show Penn State, and then we come back. So it's in, we were supposed to show Penn State, right? Is that what it is there? So then the next time we press it, we should be at we are hidden true Penn State shown. So that's how you can debug your code. Since we're running low on time and I don't want to bore you guys to death because this can be a little long. Here's a more efficient way to do it, which we didn't do today, but you can check if your cheer count is 0. This is doing it without the thank you. That does like throw a wrench and things as you're just off. But if your cheer count is 0, then you can hide your reader label, show your Penn State, increase the cheer count. Else, you can toggle. This is kind of what I meant by a stutter. You can toggle what the hidden label is. So you don't have to explicitly say we are label as true. We are label as false. So you just kind of like toggle what it was. But what I can do for you guys, because I don't want to keep you here all night, is I will figure this out and make this a lot nicer for you guys.
Is the issue that we're calling reset labels right after counter 7, so we set the text but then reset everything immediately?
Yeah, you like a counter equals on the outside, and then reset.
That could be the issue because we're showing, yeah, we're not showing you're welcome. You're right, good catch. So what we can do is we can check, we can do one more loop. We can reset there. You think that would fix it? So we saw that issue where that's showing twice. So we debug that. We are Penn State, we are Penn State. Thank you, you're welcome. And then
Oh yeah, it's counter.
thank you. So we need to figure out, our last bug is we're showing we are twice the first time. So let's see if we can figure that out. So we start, we're showing we are, okay, then the next time we come through, we increment the count, and we're going right into here. So we would probably just want to increment the count in here. Right, and then we can check, so our counter will now be 1, and we could increment after the fact. Do you think that would fix it? We move the counter down here. Or else we could swap the odds to be, let's do that. I'll figure that out for you guys, and I'll have Austin email you guys the finished solution so that you can try it at home. But I won't keep you here any longer. But thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you learned something. And now I'd like to open it up for questions if you have any.
Can you plug in your Apple phone and like emulate on your phone?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So it's actually changing as of like last month. You used to have to pay $99 a year to do that because Apple likes money. and you couldn't deploy on your device unless you had a provisioning profile with your developer account. But now, with the introduction of iOS 9, I believe they've made this so that you do not need to pay to launch to your device. You only need to pay the $99 a year if you want to submit to the App Store. So that's
you
really good.
still need to purchase the $99 because when I just plug in my phone without my certificate, it's not syncing my app to the phone. But once I install my certificate, I can run it as an all app now.
Okay. So yeah, there might be issues still. I think they did announce that though, so I think there might be a way to do it. I personally haven't tried it just because I still have my account from previous years, but yeah, I can look into that too.
I think we need a beta Xcode, like the
Oh,
next
is it?
version.
Okay.
Because I did that over the summer for my internship, and they acquired like Swift 3.0 and then the next Xcode beta. It was like a whole hassle.
Cool. Thank you. Any more questions?
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank